Victims of the unvaccinated. Novak Djokovic, the world's top-ranking tennis player, has just been granted a medical exemption to take part in the Australian Open. Djokovic, who has won the events 9 times, won more victory, would give him a record-breaking 21st major titles. Refused to show proof of vaccinations, which is required to enter Australia. I will not reveal my status, whether I have been vaccinated or not, he told Bleak, a servant daily, calling it a private matter and inappropriate inquiry. The family of Delevics, who died last month at the age of 78, would disagree. Wick was a patient at a small hospital in the rural Iowa, US, being treated for sepsis. The hospital sought to transfer him to a larger hospital who could have surgery, but assured in COVID 19 patients, almost all of them unvaccinated, mean that there are no spare beds. It took 15 days for weeks to obtain a transfer. By then, it was too late. Who's become another of the many indirect victims of COVID 19, people who never had the virus. But that's because others who did are taken off his healthcare resources, especially beds in intensive care units. His daughter said, "The thing that bothers me the most is people's selfish decisions not to get vaccinated and the failure to see how this affects a greater group of people. There's the part that's really difficult to swallow. Last month, Rob Davidson, an emergency room physician at the hospital in Michigan, who wrote an essay for the New York Times and provided a vivid pictures of life, is a hospital that has consistently been at or never capacity for 7 weeks. The overwhelming majority of the patients that had COVID 19 and 98% of those needing acute critical care are unvaccinated. What happened to was happening at Davidson's hospital too. Those in need of more specialized treatment could not be transferred to a larger facility because nearly every treatment could not be transferred to larger to it. Davidson is unable to view the choice not to get vaccinated as a private matter. It forces patients with ruptured appendixes and broken bones to odd hours in my emergency department. It postpones surgeries for countless other people and wears out doctors and nurses. There has been considerable opposition to vaccine mandates, opposition that I have argued is misguided. With earlier variants, the unvaccinated are more likely to infect others. With the more contagious Omicron variant, the extent to which current vaccines reduce infections and the ability to spread the virus is less clear. But you do know that vaccination reduces the severity of the illness and therefore the need for hospitalization. For the situations that Davidson described, that Uck's children believed to their father's death, its different solutions is available. One that respects the decisions of those who choose not to be vaccinated but requires them to bear the consequences of their choice. Hospitals that are at a near capacity should warn the population they serve that after a certain date, far enough in the future to allow ample time for people to get fully vaccinated. They will give vaccinated patients priority over unvaccinated patients with COVID 19. The unvaccinated patients or the family of the patients may object. But if the move is in accord with a previously announced policy and everyone had the opportunity to be vaccinated before the policy took effect, people who make choices that are likely to harm others and have been warned of the consequences of those choices must take responsibility for them. Hospitals with sufficient capacity should, of course, continue to treat unvaccinated patients with COVID 19 as best they can. Despite the stress strain this puts on hospital staffs, everyone should have sufficient compassion to try to save lives. Exceptions should be made for those few patients for whom vaccinations is contraindicated on medical grounds, but not for those who claim to have religious grounds for exemptions. Such a policy is likely to increase vaccination rates, which will benefit the currently unvaccinated as well as the vaccinated and save lives, just as vaccine mandates have saved lives by increasing the number of vaccinated people. But even the policy does not pursue more people to get vaccinated. At least fewer people would die from health conditions over which they have control. Better, singer.